Okay, so one of the important things I want you to refer to is the content on the artists of the pre-1950s. These are the artists that are important for you to know, and they're the most influential. And you'll see that I have the date when they were around, the name of the artist, their peak years, and then ideally what their genre is. And their genre should draw from these genres that I've mapped out for you over here. Okay. I would like you to take a listen to each of these songs. They are on the playlist right here. You should know all of the songs in yellow when they are played back. So I've highlighted the ones you need to know. And when you're taking quizzes and exams, I'll be playing those songs, and you have to be able to identify who the artist is. What I would suggest is that you just take this playlist and play it on the background on your phone, whether you're driving in your car or walking to class. It's a time to just get familiar with this music. Without the music on this playlist, we don't have the music we hear today. I want to step through just some of these important artists. I've already talked about Scott Joplin right here. Gustav Holst was an important composer in the classical period, so I'll put him up here, Holst. The reason he's so important is that his music was very influential in the film industry. You'll hear that even Star Wars, as late as the 1970s, sounds a lot like Holst. And it is really the epitome of what the classical orchestra can do. It's as big and complex as the classical orchestra can be. You'll hear some early recordings from Ma Rainey, who is playing in the blues area. So she's down here. Let's put Ma Rainey, coming from blues into the race music. George Gershwin is an important contributor in this area here. Gershwin is one of the most influential American composers. He's going to combine classical music with the idea of musicals and jazz. He's very important in terms of bringing those genres together with a strong American identity. I've talked about Louis Armstrong, and then here you'll see I have Jerome Kern and Rodgers and Hammerstein. These are both important contributors to the musicals. Kern and Rodgers and Hammerstein. Both those names I'd like you to know. An important artist that came out in the early 30s, late 1920s is the Carter family, and they are the first family of country music. June Carter was married to Johnny Cash. So Johnny Cash's roots date all the way back into the late 1920s, 1930s. When we get to the 1930s, we start to get to the big band era. We have Benny Goodman, Duke Ellington, and Glenn Miller. Okay, those are the three. I'll put Duke Ellington and Glenn Miller, the three big artists involved in this big band era that I would like you to know. Taking a step back here in the 1930s, we have rural blues, and Robert Johnson is considered by many to be the father of blues, because blues did continue in rural America, and it was his recordings in the 1930s that really made it more popular. Even though the influence had been coming up through race and R&B, the songs recorded by Robert Johnson in his short life in the 1930s really influenced a lot of rock and roll. In jazz, we have some important female artists you need to know, Ella Fitzgerald being one, Billie Holiday being the other. Okay, and these are two voices from the 20th century that you should know, and you'll see that I have songs in there recorded by them. You should be familiar with their voice. Scrolling down here, the next important artist is Woody Guthrie. Now, Woody Guthrie, similar to Robert Johnson, and I'll put him down here, Woody, stayed true to his folk roots. Okay, and Woody Guthrie was around in the 1930s, and he was one of the first people to go around singing about social issues. The idea of social issues being important is going to play a large role in rock and roll, especially in its emergence in the folk era and in the psychedelic area. Woody Guthrie is an important forerunner to the social consciousness movement in rock and roll. The biggest artist in the first half of the 20th century was Bing Crosby. I'll just put Bing here. Bing was the crooner for the 1930s, 1940s, and 1950s that more people listened to than anyone else. Although records weren't tracked as well then, there is a likelihood that he sold as much as the Beatles and Elvis Presley, who were the other two biggest artists of this century. Louie Jordan's an important artist to know, and I have his song Choo 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 Boogie on there because that is a demonstration of the R&B movement where African Americans' popular music is going to give influence to rock and roll. And then finally I have Hank Williams, and I'll just put Hank here. Hank Williams is the first country musician that really becomes popular and starts using television and that sort of thing in the 1940s, that starts to introduce country music to a wider audience in the urban areas.